Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice Podcast, where we celebrate the resilience of the human spirit. Please check out my autumn programme for my Ancestral Healing Retreat weekend in Delphi Resort, County Galway, and also my Reiki training and mindfulness programmes coming up also in the autumn and winter. And you can check out all details on my website, sharonfitzmauricemindfulness.com. And now, on to our next guest. So my guest today is Rebecca Smith Galli, an author and columnist who writes about love, loss, and healing, surviving significant losses in her own life. Writing has helped Rebecca not just to process, but also to survive and now thrive. Rebecca, you are very welcome.
Thank you so much for having me today, Sharon. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you. And just before we came on, myself and Rebecca were talking about how we can have these conversations with other people across the globe and share more and more inspirational stories and really to offer hope to others. Because one of the things, I suppose, in tragic losses and through our own experiences in life, hope sometimes can fade. But when we hear somebody else that has gone through maybe something similar or something we think is worse than what we have experienced, it does sometimes give us that spark of hope that maybe we too can just take that next step or just move forward, or maybe just for today, I won't give up. So, Rebecca, you're very welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I do think that when you realize you're not alone and going through tough times, that's part of why I wrote to stay connected to people that could help me through things. And you learn from other people, and you do get inspiration from others on how they have approached obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. And such a significant loss in your life. You were only 20 when your brother died accidentally, and he was only 17, I believe, Rebecca. What a shock, first of all, losing a brother so young and being so young yourself and trying to process that shock. Don't mind the grief later on. What do you recall about that time?
It was shocking. Our family was closely knit by design. I like to say we had family time together and enjoyed one another's company. We excelled in our own ways. I was the oldest. Forrest was the only boy. My younger sister was the baby. We each kind of had our predetermined roles in family, and life was really rolling along smoothly. My brother wanted to go to the Wake Forest University, study and uh, become a lawyer, and then get into politics. He was a leader at church, leader in the athletic field, on the music front. He really was that kid, and to see him just suddenly have this accident and not survive it was truly a shock to our family. And in many ways, we shattered. I'm not embarrassed to say that. You would think that you could kind of survive that. My dad was a minister. We came from a family of faith, but all of us were shaken deeply by this. But one of the things I learned is that what gave me strength later on as I came upon my own challenges was seeing how my parents coped with the loss of their son. I didn't realize at the time I had a front row seat to watching parents and mature adults take on this loss and move through it. And I think that's one of the other things I learned was that we travel through grief in different ways. My father very publicly could speak about this very quite honestly and became a noted lecturer on grief. My mom was very private and joined support groups. I was in college, and my girlfriends helped me move through grief just by structure and companionship. They didn't know Forrest that well, but they knew me, and often I just relied on their momentum to keep me moving. But my sister was only 17 months apart, and it was a community loss for her, not just Forrest was gone, but Forrest in her community, her high school. Had many of the same friends, and she actually wanted to be with him. And so my parents were very proactive in getting her support for that and helping her move through grief in a very different way. So it was shattering, but we survived it. We learned from it. And I think we took many of the lessons that we learned during that first and deepest loss uh, to equip us for what was to come next.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think it's one of the things when we talk about grief, nobody can ever prepare you, how you will handle it. And just seeing that as a family, the way everyone's reaction was differently and what they fell back on or who they allowed to support them. And even with your sister wanting to be with Forrest, it's amazing how grief can tear us apart and show our vulnerabilities and our fears, so unexpectedly. And even if somebody was prepared for the loss, of a family member, it's still a grief we're all going to have to move through at some point in our lives. But like you, I think if we have experienced grief, sometimes in our younger lives, and watched how other people have moved through it, it helps us to understand that it doesn't have to look one way and we don't have to just do it one this way or that way, and how your sister did it or your mother or your father were all different. So it allowed you that openness, I suppose, when again you were going to experience more grief in your life, and again something you couldn't prepare for. But one of the things I would like to say, because you have two beautiful books out, and your father asked you to keep a journal when your brother passed to help you to process your own thoughts and feelings. And really, I suppose that began your writing journey, Rebecca, without even realizing it at the time, maybe. But how did the journaling really help you? Can you go back to that moment when you started to just allow the words to fill the pages?
I think it gave me a chance to be very honest about how I was feeling and get it all out and put it somewhere as opposed to spinning around in my head. It seemed like it was a circular, why did this happen? How did this happen? This isn't right. The whole trying to make sense of something that really you can't make sense of. And so for me, it was a way to just start to get it out, get it in a place I could look at it in the future and say, yep, I've had that thought before. And
Mhm.
yes, maybe there's another way to look at this. And so I think it was very therapeutic for me to just acknowledge the feelings and get them in a place that I could revisit and in some ways study later on as I kind of move through. You go through, there stages of grief, but in my experience, it's very much like a spiral. You'll go through one stage and then you'll revisit it, the same stage. You aren't finished with it yet. And I don't know that we're ever all the way through grief. I think we just put it in a different place in our mind where we're not really looking through it to see our life and the life ahead of us, but we put it in respectful shelves in our mind where we honor it from time to time. We welcome it when it comes back to visit us, because it really is only an expression of how deeply we feel about the person that we lost. So I like to say, grief is as unique as your fingerprint. I think we all go through grief differently. And it's also a strange companion. We never know when it's going to come back to visit us. But if we can somehow honor and respect it instead of fear it, I think it can have a healthier role in our life.
I love that. And when you said grief can be a companion and an unexpected companion, and it's so true, one way I suppose that I accept grief, in my own life and through the people that I have, not lost, but physically lost, but I know they're still very present with me in many ways, is that from the moment we're born, we're another breath closer to death. And of course, none of us want to go anytime soon because it is part of our life journey, our life cycle as human beings. But when it comes unexpected and when it comes to us and to our children, it's a very different understanding. And you have been through that in so many different ways that to write about your journey, and being able to express your truths is really important because it is a process that only you can go move through yourself, but that others can, I suppose, resonate with what you're saying and they can connect with parts of that grief that maybe they don't understand in that moment or through the pain or trauma of it. And that it helps them to maybe gain clarity and understanding that it's okay, whatever way you move through this, wherever you are, it's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that encouragement that to respect the journey, respect the learning, respect the pace. All of those are important in moving through it, and also learning as you go. To take the time to realize what you're learning as you go through the process, because in my experience, they're almost paths. I call them kind of like paths in the wilderness. When you're going through things, there's ways you cope that is your style. And if you can identify the things that keep you going, then that's kind of your arsenal that you identify. These are the things that keep me fired up, and these are the things that don't. And to move to those things that can be encouraging and hopeful and provide companionship. And sometimes you have to get pretty strict about the things that do derail you and say, no, I'm not going to do that right now because I'm more vulnerable than I have been. Not always this vulnerable, but when I am, I know these are my go-to things that are supportive.
And that's a really good learning, isn't it? So from that 20-year-old young woman losing her brother and in college and having, friends to support you and all of that and keeping your journal, you went down to get married and have some beautiful children. Tell us about that.
Yeah, after my brother's death, life kind of got back on track. I attended kind of college of my dreams with the scholarship of my dreams, met the man of my dreams, married. Um, I had our goal was for him to get his MBA and for me to be 29 with our first child, and our firstborn hit all of that. He got his MBA. My daughter was born when I was 29, and she was beautiful and healthy, and life was great. Um, then my second son was born, and he had seizures. My third child was born, and she had autism. My fourth child was born, and he had a blood disorder that made him medically fragile for the first few months of life. So life got complicated really quickly in that small amount of time, and I think we did a pretty good job of coping as each one of these came along. Um, but it did take a toll on the marriage, and we separated and divorced, and had great counseling during that. I told our therapist, if as a result of the therapy, we're either going to have an amazing marriage or an amazing divorce, but we're going to have an amazing experience here. And we wound up having an amazing divorce. He continues to be supportive of me. I've been for all these years since, and we vacation together. We talk regularly, and he's remarried and has a child that calls me Aunt Becky.
Mhm.
And so, we leaned into the positive of that in a very difficult period of life.
Mhm. So through all of that and having your beautiful children, as you said, life got very complicated in a short space of time, which again can take its toll on any relationship, but it didn't end there because 9 days after your divorce, can you please tell our
Yes.
listeners what happened to you?
Yes, 9 days after my divorce, I woke up with strange shooting sensations in my legs, and 6 hours later, I was paralyzed by transverse myelitis, a rare inflammation of the spinal cord that affects 1 in a million. So life got even crazier very quickly. Uh, but I was very hopeful at the time that I was paralyzed because a third of those that are paralyzed recover fully, another third recover partially, and then a third have no recovery at all. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm due.
Yeah.
So some good stuff for once, maybe that hope will really, I'll get the A this time instead of the C or whatever. But it did not happen. And I think I probably learned another whole set of learnings as I waited for clarity for that. Uh, would I walk again? Would I not walk again? And uh, when my son was diagnosed with epilepsy, he was in the hospital quite a few times, near death quite a few times, and um, I I saw a therapist at the pediatric hospital, and Matthew would be fine and be more interactive, and then he would be more listless, and I was like, I don't know, is he going to grow out of these seizures or not? And she gave me this concept that I have used time and time again when she said, when you're not sure, you can pursue parallel paths. And on the hope path that he'll grow out of the seizures, you can look, what would life look like that, and work toward that goal. And if he doesn't grow out of the seizures and actually gets worse, what would life look like then? So it put me out of being stuck, and I could kind of journey actively on two different paths. And so I did that then, and I did that again with my divorce, and I did that, well, actually I did that with my daughter's autism, and I did that with my divorce, and then I had to do it once again for paralysis. Would I walk again or would I not?
Mhm.
Uh, so it was some challenging times, but I had great people around me. Again, I continued to write about, journal my feelings, and have through every one of those unchosen paths, I'll call it, through the years. So, and that continued to be helpful, and it led to my writing newspaper columns, and then eventually the book. So it had an outcome. But I said, if I've got to live this crazy life and it can be helpful to somebody else, why not get it out there, right?
No, absolutely. And I like the way the consultant or the doctor said to you, you can focus on parallel paths. And I think that's a really important thing to say because just as that, people get stuck. Is this it? Is this the way it's going to be? And we focus on all the things that are not going to be instead of giving ourselves two ways to look at it. And I suppose in many ways in our lives as well, you like that when you're 20 years of age going to college and your path is, get into the relationship, get married, have the child, plan everything in your life. But we don't see the other path that's there for us, or ever do we want to see it because we just want to see everything's as fabulous. But that's life doesn't always turn out fabulous. We always have, as I said, you have a path in front of you, but sometimes you're diverted off, just like you are if you're going on a long journey, you're not sure of the direction, you go off course somewhere, or the car breaks down and something else happens. But what we're doing along those paths is we're always learning something about ourselves. And to me, they're paths or diversions that, as you said, we haven't chosen, but maybe they've been chosen on some level for us to learn something about ourselves. So through everything that you have gone through, you know, and even sitting there with your son and the doctor saying that to you, and it gave you a way to look. Yes, well, what if I can have the Hope Road and I can have the other road? And it helped you. have options. But what else did it help you with, Rebecca, in your life?
I think that the ability to see things two different ways gives us a sense of control, and that we can choose how we look at things. And it actually was the same therapist, the one that gave me the parallel paths, when I wound up taking my daughter. Brittany was 3 when Matthew presented with seizures, and she was playing with another child. And I overheard the conversation, and she said to her friend, you know, we can only have girl babies because boy babies have seizures. And I thought, oh boy, she's having some trouble processing what's happening to her brother. So when I put her into therapy, uh, she, this was called magical thinking, where they're trying to make sense of their world. But also Brittany began to act out a little bit, and she said, we need to get Brittany to talk about her feelings. So she gave us this exercise to do at night, which it was discuss our happy, sad, mixed up, and mad feelings. And it was pretty easy to identify the happy and the sad and the mad. But the mixed up feelings were interesting because it allowed you to look at something two different ways. For example, it rained. So the bad thing about that was it rained out her softball game or her kickball game or whatever it was. But the positive was we needed the rain because the grass had begun to turn brown. So through that nightly exercise, and at the time I was just doing what the therapist said. And then later I look back at it, it's like to be able to look at things as mixed up, that this is terrible that this happened, but to look for the good in it or to look for the learning in it kind of gives you a framework for approaching life.
Mm.
I think I have to remind myself about that a lot of times, because sometimes when you look at all the negatives, it's like, come on, enough is enough, right? But there's always some positive in it. In fact, that's when I began writing, I had an instructor that said, if you really want to keep at writing, you need to know why you write.
Mm.
You need to really distill it down to what is it about writing? Why are you doing this? And I thought about it and I said, well, I believe life can be good no matter what. And I have had a lot of what, I will admit that. But I also write to remind myself what I believe, that life can be good no matter what. And so everything that I've written, the little columns that I've written, are slice of life, but scenarios. But it reminds myself that despite what's going on, life can still be good if we look for it and we try to learn from it.
I love that. Again, I'm hearing it. It's the perspective on what's past and what is, and also the affirming to yourself, that if I tell myself long enough that, what I can find something or a blessing in today, that I will do it and it'll become like anything, the more we practice it, the more that we look out for it. And again, it's something that helps carry us then when those days we do feel more vulnerable, as you said, and it is harder. And you'll say, well, let me just find one thing today, just one thing today, and that will help me to move through this day. And like you, I love writing because it's a beautiful way to express what we're feeling and thinking inside. And sometimes saying that out loud, another person may not fully understand what you're saying, but when you write it, you can make it clear in your own mind, and it helps you process the feelings. It helps you process that movement, really, of emotions. So I just think you're amazing, to have come so far, even at that stage. But then you went on to have another loss in your life.
Uh, uh, Many. Lost my father to cancer. I lost my mother to a rare blood disorder. Um, I had lost my 15-year-old son, Matthew. Um, and that was actually the same day that I lost my mother, believe that or not, in two different states, two different situations. So, yes, yeah, grief keeps coming back, but like I said, at least I have a good way of welcoming that because I loved all of them deeply. So I do respect it. It was hard to lose all of them, each in different ways. My father had cancer and I think it was 5 months short of the 5-year marker of kind of being out of the woods with it. My mother's death was kind of eventually it was expected, but it was a blood disorder nobody had ever heard of, and Matthew just got pneumonia. He was 15 years old, and he actually had been diagnosed with they call it an undiagnosed disease of the central nervous system. So he became had a rapid decline. But made it 15 years. So in some aspects, it was, he'd been close to death many times. So in some aspects, it was unexpected, the timing, of course, on the same day my mom died. But um, it's a lot to hold in your head and try to make sense of it. And one of the things my dad said that even when I say this out loud to you, the composite of everything just gets heavier and heavier. And one of the things he said to me that I hold so dearly is, it's instead of finding the answers, sometimes our goal has to be how to live with the questions. And I have to do that. I have to let that go to mystery, let that go to something beyond my understanding, but not without my ability to cope through. And let all those losses, I talk about shelves in my mind where they reside, and anniversaries come and I bring them down and I cherish them again, and then I put them back because it's very important what I look through in my day-to-day work, in my day-to-day living, in the connections that I make. And you go back to what you were saying with the structure that you have in coping with things, and whether that be a gratitude journal, or sometimes I even have a better journal, which was one thing that was better today than it was the day before, just a little better. And if you create that structure, you get this kind of muscle memory, like, where do I go to when I'm spinning? Oh, well, I know my daily readings help me get back on track. My morning lemon water helps me get back on track. Reaching out to friends or helping someone else and not so focused on myself. These are the things that I know keeps me moving through. And when that heaviness threatens to suffocate you, I think remembering the structure and moving to that, it's a discipline though. Sometimes it's not apparent. Oh yeah, let's go do these things. It's like, no, it's a when I say life can be good, it's not life is good. Life can, and can implies work. And it's work to remember structure and to develop your go-to things that are positive for you, and the things that drag you down. I mean, all that is just not particularly natural. So I think we have to discover it. We have to have the discipline to use it and the wherewithal to remember it. That these are the things that are helpful.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that goes for, everybody that exists in the world. They have to find two or three things every day that are going to help them to rediscover the magic of life, the gratitude for their moments, and that this feeling will pass, even though it's a really awful feeling, because grief can be so heavy, it can be debilitating, and it can, like your sister, stop you from wanting to exist in this world any longer. But it's finding one reason just for today, maybe not to give up, one reason to live for, somebody else that loves you, one reason to say, I'll try again. And it can be that one little reason. So discovering the three or four things, like you said, that help you to keep you afloat on the very bad days are the days when it can be a bit better. And I think it's accepting of that as well, that you don't have to pretend that everything is perfect, that you just know I need supports and we all need supports along the way. So, in losing all of these beautiful family members and ending up in a wheelchair, and writing then became a support for yourself. But it was in a friend that hadn't seen you in so long, and they said, I love that. Is that you? Did you feel like, were they saying, is that you, Rebecca Faye Smith Galli? Or were you saying, is this me now?
And that was the beautiful part of that subject. It was 1997. Email was just becoming in vogue. My dad had written a column about my paralysis, and my friend had discovered my email address, and I got this email, and the subject was, "Is that you?" And he said, "I read about this in the paper. Tell me more about." He called it the strange infection. And so I hadn't seen this friend Scott in probably 15 years. He and I had gone to high school together, and then we went to same college together, and we carpooled back and forth to get back to our hometown. So we were very tight, and then life happened, different states, different careers. But we had a very firm foundation. He knew my brother, he knew my family. So he said, kind of what happened? And he was very curious. And because of his curiosity, I updated him on my marriage and my special needs children, and then my divorce, and then my paralysis. And because of his curiosity, he really dug down into what are you doing. At the time, I was heavily involved was in recovery. I thought I was going to PT 3 times a week and learning how to stand up on the parallel bars. And he was curious about that and how many dips I did to try to strengthen my upper body so that I could support my legs when it came back. Of course, it never did, but just talking through that with him allowed me a way to express what was going on, capture it. And then he did this thing where he said, do you mind if I share this with my family? Your stories. And so I started talking about my stories in the wheelchair. And so he shared it with his friends, and then I shared it with my family. And one of my friends in North Carolina said, "Becky, do you realize you have readers?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess," because did not have any interest in a writing career. I was in sales with IBM for 10 years. I was in marketing with an outplacement. So I did sales and marketing. And so I didn't even do well in freshman English. So anyway, I wrote from the heart, and someone had suggested, maybe there's an op-ed piece in here. I'd written about playing soccer in a wheelchair with my son, who at the time was 4, and I could wheel my wheelchair back and forth in front of the garage, and he would try to shoot on me, and I would block it with my wheelchair. And it was so funny to see it, because he just thought it was hilarious. And so I was getting the best workout in my life, and he was having fun trying to shoot it in. And so I wrote about that, and that was an op-ed piece in the Baltimore Sun. And that really launched a column career that lasted 12, 15 years. And then I started doing a blog, my Thoughtful Thursday blog. And all of those columns became kind of a good history for me to write the memoir, which was my first book, called Rethinking Possible, which it wasn't my title, it was my publisher's title. But when you think about it, that's pretty much hope and resilience when you rethink what's possible. So that was the first book. And then people asked, why did you, how do you stay positive? And I said, well, I have these morning readings that I do every morning, and 5 or 6 books I choose from. And so with this second book, I decided to write what I read. So I put together 365 little tiny stories or quotes and some reflective questions. So really that exchange with my friend Scott launched a whole career for me. And I had no idea at the time. I was just, responding to my dear friend who was curious.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what isn't what's amazing, and I would say to so many of the people that I work with, that everyone wants to feel seen and heard. And when you have been through so much and people say, I hope you're doing well, but they may not always want to hear how you're actually doing because then it makes them face what they're going through and they don't know how to help you and they feel awkward and all of those things. But when a friend really reaches out with curiosity and say, well, what is that? They're not afraid to ask you those hard questions. And then even showing the fun side, the hilarious side of you being in a wheelchair and your son trying to shoot at you. I mean, it is so lovely, and I always call those people earth angels because they come and they show you that it's okay to talk about what you have felt and what you're experiencing, and that we don't have to hide in the shadows just because our life is very different than the way we expected it to be, 20 years ago or whatever. And that, as you said, became an inspiration to so many other people. And then writing a column and a blog is something you never envisioned. So there is your parallel path already.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I would have never predicted that that would have been what took off in my life. And it's really interesting. I think the older I get, that thought that you just mentioned, the life you planned, how different my life is from when I could have never in a million years imagined. It's still good, but especially when you come in contact with people that are your age and their life did take the trajectory that
Mm.
you thought it would. That's a whole another thing that as I age, I'm realizing that that comparison thing doesn't do you much good. I think you really have to lean into what you're doing and what you're doing well and just keep going on that path and not look at that other one that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
that's an effort.
Yeah, sorry, Rebecca. What I was thinking was about your 20-year-old self there. And if you had said to your
Yes.
20-year-old self, Rebecca, you're going to lose all of these people, you're going to get divorced, and you're going to end up in a wheelchair. But you're going to end up an amazing writer, connect with people all over the world, and speak about your journey with such hope and inspiration. What do you think your 20-year-old self would say?
Yeah, that's fiction, there's
Yeah,
no way.
yeah,
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 it is bizarre. It's just so bizarre. But I feel loved. I feel supported. I feel encouraged. And not to say that that isn't it does. You have to put yourself out there to connect to other people. It's just isolation is the enemy. It really is. I think that that's the one thing in grief. Yes, you can want to be alone, but there's a difference between restorative time alone and isolation. And I think that's really important to keep connected to people that care about you sincerely.
yeah. And you know what it is? Because connection for all of us is something, again, as human beings, that connection is powerful. And no man is an island and no woman is an island, and we can't survive in this world without our own, on our own. I've heard of people going off to desert islands and, wanting to get away from the rest of the human race. But again, what are you hiding from? So for you, sometimes it's harder to put yourself out there in your vulnerability. But when you do, then other people come to you and say, thank you, Rebecca. That's exactly how I felt. And if we go back to the 20-year-old self, just as you said, if you told her, she would have said, that's fiction. There's no way that's possible because nobody can ever plan for any of the best or the worst times in our lives. We just, again, take it day by day. We do the best we can. And when things happen, we don't have a choice in it. But what you said is we do have a choice in how we respond to that, how we look after ourselves, how we are going to move out into the world again, easy, gently, but connecting with the people that are there to support us and really valuing the love that we've had, even from the people that are gone from our lives now, and that will never be gone from our lives. That'll always be there for us. So in your first book, it was about, rethinking possible, which is a really good title because people would look at you and say, oh my God, how is it possible that she, survived all of that? And how is it possible, being paralyzed and then continuing to live a life? And how is it possible that she can write about it so openly? So it's all of us to rethink what is possible in our lives, even when it's really hard. And the book, as you said, came from a lot of the stories that you shared in your columns, which was for you, a way to share with other people. And again, thank you to your friend Scott, who encouraged you, to go out there and share these stories, which is amazing. But in your next book, Morning Fuel, as you said, is daily inspirations to stretch your mind before starting your day. And it's something that I love because I hear people a lot of the time now saying, in the morning they wake up and they're dreading the day and it's hard to get out of bed and all of those things. And I'll say, you have to first just think, I'm actually alive. I've woken up, I can breathe, I can put my feet on the ground, or I can help myself into the chair, or I can see myself in the mirror, can hear the birds sing. It's all the things we take for granted just in that moment of waking, but how powerful it is.
Yes. I mean, if you can wake up with gratitude, and sometimes that's when I do my three things. Gratitude that my wheelchair charged. I now use a power wheelchair, and that, I didn't oversleep, and that I didn't wake up during the night, or if I only woke up twice instead of three times. I mean,
Yeah.
just to really jumpstart yourself with a positive thought, I think is a is a great way to start in appreciation. In
Yeah.
appreciation.
Yeah. And I think for me, that's what it is, when I was reading about, you and your story and Morning Fuel, I thought, isn't this an amazing place that you have ended up? And people would say, how could you say that, Sharon, after everything she's been through? Because you're able to write a book to fuel and inspire other people's mornings after everything you have been through. That's amazing and inspirational.
Well, thank you. It is, it's a different book. The memoir is kind of, soup to nuts, and all the details, but the morning fuel, it's almost like popcorn. You can have a snack here or there. I mean, you can start your day with the one. But a lot of people, they'll text me or email me and said, I just read the one about the foxes and I can't believe that happened in your yard. Or I just read the one about you and your sister, on a cruise doing this. And so it really does connect me to people,
Mm.
and the stories evoke a lot of reflection, and it seems to be, it's supposed to be fortifying, however that be, whether it be humor, inspire, encourage, or make you think. That was the lens that I used when I chose these stories. That was what I wanted to do first thing in the morning, because I think that's what I like to have in the morning, either be inspired, encouraged, or make me think about something a little bit differently. But it's been a journey. When I wrote Rethinking Possible, first time author, someone comes up to me in a bookstore and they want to know, well, so what's your book about? And I'm like, oh my gosh,
Where do I
which part do
start?
I tell? So I'm like, literally, paralysis analysis. What do I say to this person? And so after a while, it's like, I got to get a one-liner here. I got to figure out something. So I wound up saying, it's about living fully in the life you didn't plan.
Oh,
And that made people think, because if one of the ways I start my, when I'm doing a presentation, I ask everybody, I just want to make is anybody here's life not gone as planned? Can I have a show of hands? And almost everybody's hand goes up. Nobody is living that life that they planned, but we all want to live fully. And so that's the rethinking possible. That is, what can I still do with what I got? You know, one of the shortcuts I talk about is this 5 little words: even though, whatever the circumstances, I can still. What can you still do, even though your circumstances? And that's one of those kickstarters for me, especially when I'm like, oh my gosh, my body's misbehaving again. I can't do that. What can you still do? What can you still be real? What can you still do? And that's I felt that to be kind of an effective little jump start for positive thinking.
Yeah. And really, what it's doing is changing your mindset. You know, we talk about neuroplasticity, and it is changing. Again, here we are in different paths in our mind, aren't we? Where is if we think the same way, we only have the same neurons firing. But if we start to think differently, something else is sparking inside of us. So I love that, you know, when you're talking about parallel paths and, you know, we can choose different paths, or sometimes the paths are chosen for us, and how do we, you know, journey through that path, the unknown path that we never planned for. We haven't a clue what it's like. And again, we learn about ourselves and how we cope and our resilience and all of that. But I like to think of those paths in our mind as well, that they're always there and available to us. And if we could walk them in our mind and just even visualize, what would it be like if? What would it be like? Imagine what it would be like. And I go back to my child self, you know, full of imagination and curiosity, and say, what would it be like to discover that unknown path? And we can say, well, what if it's awful? But what if it's amazing? What if we meet somebody there that is going to make us believe in the power of whatever? What if I write a book and nobody reads it? But what if I write it and I connect with thousands of people all over the world? What if I'm on the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast and she's in Ireland and I'm in Maryland?
Wow, you're right.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thought. Um, and I think it's worth taking those risks sometimes to pursue it. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but you probably learned something in the process. And I think that growth mindset, if we can always foster that wherever we are. My dad used to say, no experience is wasted unless you let it be.
Yes.
And I really think that there's a lot of wisdom in that. Like, no matter what happens to you, if you learn from it, then it's not wasted. Even if
Mm.
you learn never do that again, it's
Yeah.
okay, you know?
And
It's,
had many of those, Rebecca.
yeah.
And that's why I said every experience we have, the good, bad, and the ones that whatever you want to call them, that we are always learning about ourselves. And for me, it's learning about the strength and resilience we have, the courage and bravery that we all have, that we don't realize we have until we need to have it. And when we lose people we love and we grieve so hard, it's because we loved them so much. And again, we don't realize that always when they're alive. You know, it's not that we take them for granted, but we just believe they're going to be always there until they're not. And then there is that absence, that space. But I'm going to read an excerpt of one of your beautiful parts in Morning Fuel, and it's "Bloom where you're planted." So the plaque still sits on my kitchen shelf, and it reads, "Bloom where you are planted." My mother embodied those words. As a minister's wife, she moved 6 times in 25 years. I never saw her struggle with the transitions, yet she was there for me as I struggled with each of mine. I went to elementary school in one city, middle school in another, attended high school in yet one more, and was a freshman in college during the last move. Every step of the way, she not only guided me, but also showed me how to bloom where I was planted. Even just that first bit, and I'm not going to read all the rest of it. You have to get the book and read it because it's amazing.
Thank you.
But even that, just even learning from your mother, that through her transitions in life, that you were watching and learning from her. And so when you went from different schools and different places, and every step of the way, wherever you are, that's where you've been planted for now. And you can bloom there if you nourish yourself, water yourself like you would the plant, give it what it needs to bloom. And for me, that's kind of a testimony to life because we've all been given things in life that we didn't choose. We've no control over outside, things that happen to other people. But wherever I am right now, and I want to stay strong in myself, so I would think about the roots and where my roots started and what are the strongest roots and what are the ones that I really want to focus on and bring that energy and strength up into my being. And those, if I am a tree, the branches, who are the people I connected to and have always connected to? The leaves are, is what am I growing from those experiences, the good and bad and not so good? And you were like that because people could say you were knocked out of your planter or your roots were, pulled out of the ground. But wherever you found yourself, you've planted yourself there and you've started to bloom and grow and blossom, should I say, Rebecca, between your columns and then in your books. And now by sharing your story on podcasts with other people, that people will see I can grow anywhere if I choose to nurture myself wherever I am right now.
I don't know what to say to that. It's a beautiful tribute. It's My mother taught me a lot. My dad, as I have said, was more public and articulate with exactly how he felt and would say things in very memorable ways. But my mom had a simple faith and a simple approach to life. It didn't take a lot for her to um, practically just engage. She knew kind of almost instinctively to reach out to other people, to create connections. And I watched her do it in the community. She'd become active in the church, active in the schools, be a volunteer. She said that was the way you get to know people,
Mhm.
is not just saying hello and how are you, but serving on a committee together. And you get to see how people approach, how they problem solve, how they work together. And she really engaged in the community in a way that taught me the importance of that and how it was nurturing to her, and it allowed her to embrace the sense of community. She just it was a very natural thing for her. With my paralysis, I think I've had to be more intentional about that because it's harder. And one of the things I've had to learn to do is to ask for help. And I tell you what, that is not my nature. I like to do it myself, and be independent. But I have to admit, I need help, and I need help more. It's been 28 years I've been in the wheelchair, and I need a lot more help now than I did in the early years. But somebody told me, one of my friends told me, you realize it's an honor when you ask us to help you. You're allowing us to use our gifts to help you. I
Mhm.
thought, okay, that's one way to live. I like that. It makes me feel a little less disabled, I guess,
Yeah,
to realize that when you ask for help, it's really a strength, that I
absolutely.
need it. And being real about, if you can't do it yourself, then problem solve who can help you. And I have a list now. I keep the list. These are people that have asked if they can help, and I've become more and more. It's easier and easier for me to ask for help these days. It's still not my first go-to. First, I want to see if I can figure it out myself, but um,
You have a
people do want to help.
community.
Excuse
You
me?
like you like your mother, you've created a community of
Yes.
people that you can reach out to. And you know what, you're there for them also. It's not as if you're asking them to do something for a stranger. They're there for you. They want to be there for you. And again, that was a lovely lesson for your mother, to go out there, get involved, create communities for yourself. But you've done that even in your writing. So through and again, even in grief, we form communities of people that are experiencing similar journeys to ourselves. And we sometimes didn't realize that we ever needed that community. You never thought you'd need a community of people that have been paralyzed. So there is, again, as I said, all of these paths that have been placed before you, you would never have dreamed of. But through it, the one thing you found is connection. And I believe you've also found such a beautiful purpose and passion in your life, that you are helping to inspire so many others, Rebecca. So I'm so grateful that you came on to share this conversation today with me.
Well, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it as well. You're amazing. You are. Really create a community here for people to share how they get through some tough things. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah. And again, it's these conversations that I think we need to have more of, and not just brush over on the surface level things, but to go deep beneath them and to see, well, why are these beautiful books created? A lot of books are created out of pain and loss, and some books are created out of imagination and beauty and magic. But no matter the reason how they were created, there is the story behind them, and there is about the person writing them. And I love getting to meet the people behind the books. And it's like opening the cover and seeing them revealed, not through the words, but everything that inspired or led them to write those first lines that have captured audiences. So, Rebecca, hats off to you. And I mean, it was so lovely to chat to you.
Same here. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, thank you to everybody for listening to that beautiful conversation with Rebecca. If you want to check her out, please go to her website, RebeccaFayeSmithGalley.com. You'll also find her on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Chair Writer. Please do go and follow her, show her your support. And if you feel this conversation would help somebody in your community, please do share it. Share it to your socials, to your own community networks, or on your own websites. Because, as I said to Rebecca, these conversations are so important in this fast moving world where people are losing connection, not only with others, but with themselves. So I thank you as always for listening, following, and subscribing. But until next time, take care of you.